Oh, hey, you are listening to a new episode of Tiny Little Victories with me, your host, Jennifer Kite-Powell. I am so glad that everyone is back with us today. I just absolutely love it. If you stick around to the very end, I'm going to tell you a secret. Doesn't everybody love secrets? Well, on today's show, we have an amazing writer. Her name is Shalene Gupta. Now, listen very carefully because this woman is absolutely incredible. She went to Columbia University and got her Master's of Science in Journalism. She went to Johns Hopkins University and has a bachelor's degree in writing seminars and psychology. The list just goes on and on and on. She is a journalist and writer for a number of publications where she's had bylines in The Atlantic and ESPN, Fast Company, Harvard Business Review, WBUR in Boston. She even wrote book reviews for Kirkus Reviews. You know, I had my book reviewed through Kirkus Reviews. I meant to ask her about that. She has additional bylines in the New Straits Times in Malaysia. She also worked at Mint in India and Go Company in China. Come on. One of her jobs was a research associate at Harvard Business School. She was there for a while. And from that, she actually wrote a book, The Power of Trust, How Companies Build It, Lose It, and Regain It, published in July of 2021. Her second book is called The Cycle, Confronting the Pain of Periods and PMDD. That came out in February of 2024 this year. And one of the most interesting things about Shalene is she is definitely a nonfiction writer, but the story that she tells us is about how she started out as a fiction writer, and she went away to Malaysia to sort of find herself and get unlost, and came back and was still a little lost, she says, but she began to see her path. She took every opportunity that came her way and created what all of us envy as writers is a living from writing. She is the perfect example of a writer and a journalist and an author and a thinker and a speaker that has turned her passion for writing into a profitable profession. So sit back and enjoy this interview with Shalene Gupta. So Shalene, I'm so excited that you actually had the time to come and sit with us on Tiny Little Victories. Thank you for joining us from Boston.
Jennifer, thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely honored to be on here.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like I feel like I'm a baby journalist compared to you. The work that you have done just in every single major like high value media target. How did you get into that? You've got Fortune, you've got Fast Company, you've got I think you also have like Kirkus review book writer, right? You wrote reviews for Kirkus. Maybe you reviewed my book. How did you
I did.
move into this part of writing for all of these magazines? Did you just wake up one day and say I want to be a journalist, or what how did you get there?
You know, the irony is I actually wanted to be a novelist. And for the longest time, I never read the newspaper. I actually grew up in a house where we did not get the newspaper. I think we would get one news magazine. It was India Today, so not even like American news. And,
Yeah.
and so not really the background you would expect.
Yeah.
And straight out of college, I graduated during the recession. It became very clear to me that getting a job in writing would be challenging. I was lucky enough that I did get a job, and after hours, I would go home and I would try to write fiction. I would send it out to literary magazines, and it
Really?
quickly became really like that my life was writing short stories after work. And it quickly became clear
Uh-huh.
to me that this was not a way to make a living. I think I made $50 in the 2 years that I was sending out stories.
I totally agree with you about, okay, you guys, I'm just going to tell you the truth. We had a real big sound problem there right after Shalene was talking about how she quickly realized that writing novels and short stories wasn't going to make money. We had a big sound problem. So we just had a big laugh, and we're coming back from the laugh to you all. So that's why we all sound a little funny and why we're giggling a little. Yeah. Right, Shalene?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, like you made $50, but you did that still think, well, I'm still a great writer, so I'm just going to shift gears a little bit?
Right, like, writing is utterly joyous, like, despite the rejection, like, that's the hour of the day that I live for.
I think I'm just going to start with say, I love that you said hour of the day, because I feel the same way when I start to write. It's that feeling of that I know that I'm great at it, but also that feeling that you're creating something that other people will connect with. And so I love that you said that. And so after you realized that, what was your next plan?
So you can tell that I was really good at planning at this part of my life. I was like, I just need to spend a year abroad, and obviously there I will come up with the great American novel. So I got a Fulbright to teach English in Malaysia. I did not write the great American novel, but during that time, I also traveled around Asia in general. I spent 3 months in China. I did a stint in India, and it was a lot easier there to freelance for the local papers because there was just such a high demand for English writers in the English language publications. So I was able to freelance when I was teaching in Malaysia at the national paper and place articles, just because there was a lot of interest in why are there American teachers here. And I realized that even though I'd spent most of my life not reading the news, there was something really magical about interviewing people. I had worried for a long time that my imagination was quite limited because when I wrote short stories, they were always about biracial Asian American women who wanted to be writers. And I was like, I'm running out of material really quickly.
I love that you started there because, like, everybody says, write what you know, write what you know. So you were writing what you know, but like you said, far, how far can that go? But the other thing that strikes me is to hear another writer talk is that you said, you hadn't been reading the news, but you were really good at like interviewing people, which is one of my favorite things to do as well. And I think marrying those two things together is going to go much further than sticking with like, I'm this person, I'm a Southern girl, I lived in France, and those are my experiences. Yeah, I mean, get in line, right, for the number of people that escaped to Paris, to find themselves. And you did the same thing. You went to, Hemingway did it too. Like you went to Malaysia.
Exactly, exactly. And I was sorely disappointed because I did not find myself in Malaysia. It turns out that you can still be lost and even more lost in a different country. But what it did do is it made me think about going to journalism school, and that changed my career.
Okay. Yeah, because you went to Columbia and got a degree in journalism, which is like way up here at the high end. I mean, that choice that you made was probably quite pivotal because that school is just like crazy hyper focused on creating really good journalists, in my opinion. The people that come out of there, wow. I mean, look at your resume. Like, do you think if you hadn't gone to Columbia and didn't have this drive, you would be this prolific of a writer in mainstream magazines? And also, you've written 2 books. We're going to get to that in a minute. But did that moment shore that confidence up for you?
I've had this discussion with a lot of people because journalism school is really expensive and being a journalist does not pay well. So I think there is a really valid question in is it worth going to journalism school? Do you need it? And I would say, if you are someone who loves journalism, who's been reading the news, who's gotten the internships, you can teach yourself everything that J school offers. But in my case, I I had nothing, right? Like, all I knew is I could write, but I had never even thought about the news, I'd never listened to the news. So for me, journalism school was absolutely essential. The other part was I'm a woman of color, the child of immigrants. There are no writers in my family. They're engineers, doctors, and business people. So I was really kind of forging this path on my own. And Columbia gave me, it gave me a portal to think about journalism and sort of just this code of conduct and sort of the beginnings of it just opened a lot of doors in terms of thinking about the craft of it and sped that up. And it also just gave me connections, which was incredibly valuable. And I hate saying this, but I do feel like journalism, especially those national publications, is a very gated community.
Oh, 100%. I'm so glad that you said that. It's very much like the art world, it's very gated. It's very difficult to get into. And I think you bring up a really great point. Like journalism itself doesn't pay. Journalism school is very expensive. And then you have the gated world up there, which is all about connections. And I think, I do think that I do think that if you went today to want to be a journalist, a lot of people ask me, like they probably ask you, I think I didn't have the internet, social media, any way to access news. You didn't read newspapers. You had one newspaper. And you had to do everything literally by your own muscle, right? You had to go out, you had to scrape together people. You couldn't just send an email. You couldn't do any of that. So I think I also went to journalism school, but not Columbia. I went to the University of Georgia. And, the thing they taught me, like they taught you, is structure and thinking about, how you think about talking to people and connecting with people, which is how you make a good story.
Absolutely. I feel like that year of journalism school was probably the most valuable year of my education. It's been over a
Mm.
decade since I've gone, but nearly every day I think about something that some professor said or some classmate said or a lesson that I learned. So we could talk all day about this, Jennifer, but I'm just going to say, like,
I know we could, and honestly, we could. I'm such a fangirl of what you've been doing, and like we could talk all day. And I honestly don't know if people talk enough about journalism, right? You always get the negative side, no, the journalists and the media and blah blah blah. But like, think about the value that like I look at all the places that you've written and the people that you've talked to in that network. Look at this kind of shaping that you're doing through your stories to make people think. And I think we're in trouble right now with thinking.
I think it's really easy to undervalue a free press and a skilled press until
Yeah.
you go somewhere where that doesn't necessarily exist. So I think it's very easy for many people to take for granted what we have here. And absolutely, I'm not going to say that the media landscape here is perfect and it's unbiased or there aren't
Yeah.
problems. There are absolutely problems. But there's just like having worked in different countries, when I was in China, I had some stories killed and they were really interesting stories, but they were seen as
Mm.
it was some of them were critical of the government, and it was just very clear I would not be allowed to publish. And I don't blame the owner. He had a publication that he needed to stay open, and he depended on being on good terms with the government to keep it open.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such an interesting experience. And you're right. Like Malaysia and China, I mean, I love what you said about the value. You value it when it's not there. And how hard was that for you to kill that story?
I still think about that story. I mean, it was essentially about uh, how museum curators, the job of a museum curator was already like pre-selected, but technically the museum had to have open job applications. And so all these people who are really hoping, come from all over the country, invest money and go
Mm.
into this open interview, which, yeah, the candidate has already been selected.
So the government doesn't want that story out. So, I mean, that's the thing. You're just telling a story about something that's happening, but that government, that's interesting that you still think about it. I find that interesting that it's still there for you in your head.
It's always the ones that got away, right?
Always the ones that got away. It's always the ones. I do want to ask you about your two books because I didn't know, I love that you said you don't want to be a novelist when you woke up and you went to find yourself and you were lost. I guess you got unlost, Shalene, because since then you have published two books, one on the power of trust, which I'm dying to talk to you about. And the most recent one was I'm going to do the title. It's called The Cycle Confronting the Pain of Periods and PMDD. Two exactly different topics. The power of trust, talk to me about that book and how you worked on that book and what that book changed for you.
Yeah, so, I was doing journalism, but essentially the goal had always still been to write books and to be a novelist. So I ended up quitting my job at Fortune and just being like, I'm going to spend a year writing a novel. I lasted about 3 weeks before I was just like, I cannot deal with talking to imaginary people in my head. So I got myself a part-time job at Harvard Business School, and it was just really meant to prevent myself from going crazy. But essentially, it turned into the power of trust. My boss had this book she had been working on about layoffs, and I took a look at it, and there was so much cool material because it turns out companies that do a good job of doing layoffs, which is to say that they avoid layoffs completely and resort to
Yeah.
other solutions, are actually doing a really good job of earning trust in many different dimensions with many different stakeholders, from their employees to their investors. Like, there's some really brilliant humanistic thinking going on. And I was just like, this should be a book about trust. And I'm lucky my boss didn't fire me or say, how dare. You just
Yeah.
commented the book I've been working on for a while should be something
Yeah.
else.
You basically just tanked my book. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, she was I had no idea because she was so gracious about it, and then later she was like, "Shalene, that was ballsy," and it's like she didn't say the word ballsy,
Oh
I'm
my
saying that,
God.
but
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. I mean, it was ballsy. I love it. I love that though, because that's again like stepping into yourself and you recognized that there was something there. It's something good there to tell a story about. Yeah. I mean, if you don't take these opportunities, Shailene, like you don't go. And I love that you said you were going to go crazy, and then you took a part time job, which I think writers should be around people. Like it's that experience. You get like input. You can imagine it. I probably need to do that, but this is why I do this podcast, so I don't go crazy in my isolated writer world.
oh, I was going to say the paradox of being a writer is that you need to spend hours alone in a room, but at the same time, you need to observe the human condition.
It is a very fine balance, and I love the opportunities that you take to put you into that position. So after The Power of Trust, then you finish this other book about period pain, which nobody ever talks about. So thank you for that. And how did that book come about?
So while I was in the midst of writing the Power of Trust, I also got diagnosed with PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And I had never heard of PMDD, but it had a really huge impact on my life. So for people who don't know, it's a form of severe PMS. About a third of people who have it have attempted suicide. 70% of the people who do have it attempt suicide on a regular basis. So it's really intense. It has a strong impact on people.
That is, I had to look it up myself when I saw your book to figure out what it was. And I it doesn't surprise me that that much pain would affect a woman, that it would come to that a third, because I just don't think that the healthcare system cares about women's health and, PMS and this disease. What are we calling this? Is it a disease or a disorder or a condition?
Oh god, you're asking the wrong person. You'd think I'd
Yeah,
know, but
okay.
I mean, essentially, like, a dis it's called a disorder, right? PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
essentially,
Yeah.
there's a way in which the medical system does not pay attention to periods, and it does not pay attention to mental
Yeah.
health, and there's an interplay between women's mental health and hormones that it's known on the street. You get a group of women together and they'll be talking
Yes.
about hormones. We talk about it in a really
Yeah.
derogative and pejorative way. But in terms of actually sitting down and talking about, when is this interrupting people's lives? When is this creating a negative
Mhm.
impact? What can we do about it? That conversation is completely absent. We're starting to have it, we do have it around postpartum depression, but I was just talking to some clinicians, and apparently it's because that affects the quality of the baby's life. And then we're having it a little bit around menopause, but as you notice, that's also about the absence of the period. And
Yes.
the more I dug into it, the more angry I became because,
Yeah.
on a given day, a lot of people are menstruating, and about 10% of the population does have PMDD.
10% is a big number. That's a big number. And I, 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 this is the type of thing that we have to talk about because, you know, there are so many women in the world. Like you said, on any given day, like people are menstruating. I went through menopause, and I found that same like conversation on the street. I like how you say that conversation on the street. And then, when you go through that, people, the community, the healthcare community is not there. I think you're right. We are talking about it more openly. It's interesting that you talk about that one postpartum around the baby. But what about us? Let's talk about the woman, right? Let's take it back to how it affects your life, the people around you, your work. Uh yeah, and that this is the book that does that, right? This is the book that sort of elevates that street talk.
Yeah, it was meant to lay out the land and just sort of provide, what is
Like that.
PMDD? What is the, biology 101 here that's going on? Because we're still not really being taught in school, that periods have multiple phases,
Yes.
after you ovulate, you a lot of people will start to notice that become like their energy changes. They become more tired, they might become a little more emotionally sensitive. Um, and this affects like most people. We deserve to know this. And we're not told that. And then PMDD also just, why are we not having the conversation and digging into some of the sexist arguments around
Oh,
it?
all of the sexist
And it's
arguments, yeah.
actually really sad. Exactly,
It
because
I think it is really sad. I'm glad you said that. It is tragic. It is sexist and it's tragic. And on one hand, it's not even one hand. It's sexist and it's tragic. Period. End of story. I don't. What's it going to take though? What bothers me is like here we are in 2024, and we're still not really any further on the position of women in terms of healthcare, like you said, and just this mental health issue. And I remember being a teenager and having my period, and I was very affected by them. Very, my sister as well, just crushed. And, my mother took us to the doctor and he was like, oh, they'll be fine. Just having their period. You couldn't even like sit up. You couldn't even do your schoolwork. You couldn't do anything. And yet nobody cared. Like you were just forced to go and keep going. And I think it was, I mean, when I got to the end of my period times, I was so happy because, I was really glad to go to menopause. I was like, whew, let's get that out of the way. And nobody's talking about it. There was one book written by Christine Northrup, actually, about like, let's just break down this menopause stuff, right, for women. Let's talk about what the medical community is not talking about or doing. And I think we need more books like this because we need to bring it out in the open and we need to address it, like you said, like off the street and get people to think about it. I mean, most people, our producers got a woman in the house. So, I'm sure men also experience this, what happens, the results of a period or PMDD.
exactly, this is not a woman-only issue. Men come
Yeah.
from somewhere to begin with. Uh,
Yeah.
Many men will end up with a female partner, not everyone, and a lot of
Yeah.
men will end up with a female child. And even if they don't, they're still inhabiting a world full of women.
Exactly. I mean, just exactly. You're gonna have to cut that down because too many exactly's. But like, I'm just like so excited to hear about this conversation. So, how is the book doing? It's out there? Are you getting a lot of feedback from people that they're feeling like, yes, Shalene, thank you for writing this book?
It's interesting because, it's reaching the PMDD community. I had hoped that it would reach more people than that, but it is a tough sell to write about
Yeah.
periods and mental health. Like, I can understand why people are like, I don't think that's gonna be my summer beach read." Totally get it. Um, but I do worry about that
Oh,
because it's the people who don't have who've never heard of PMDD, but who do have it,
yeah. Yeah.
who the book will impact the most.
Yeah, because
I
they don't
do hear
know
from
because
people, though,
nobody
all
talks about it.
exactly, exactly. I was in my early 30s when I was diagnosed, and the doctor was just like, "I cannot believe you've been suffering like this for decades." And I was just like, "Yeah, I can't either." Like, somewhere along the line, society failed.
Yeah,
Um,
totally, 100%.
and I do get notes from people in the PMDD community all the time. I just got one from somebody in Dubai, which was incredibly touching to me that the book had made it to Dubai. And
Well, what does it mean for you to know that someone in Dubai read your book? I mean, because it's a whole different culture. It's, a whole different part of the world. How did that feel for you?
It was incredibly validating. I really struggled with the decision to write this book. Prior to that, most of my writing had been in the business sphere, and when I sent this book proposal to my agent, he was just like, "This was not what I was expecting," which is completely fair. I can understand why all of a sudden he has this manuscript about menstrual problems, and I think it was more about my relationship than most of my friends knew. And I was like, like I make great decisions, right? Um, and I continue to feel vulnerable at times and wonder if that was, the best decision because it is such a personal book about such taboo topics. But then, I get these notes from places like Dubai, and I realize this is a universal issue. People all over the world are suffering. And the conversation in the US around PMDD is not very advanced. I imagine there are other places where it does not exist at all. So to be hearing from people, it means a great deal that there was a that potentially this book is helping people and giving voice to a truth that they're living, and that makes it all worth it.
Shailene, that is monumental because there's not many people, I don't believe there are many people in the world that can say that, right? By writing this book, which is, you're right, I can see where your agent would be like, wait, what? What's going on with this manuscript? But to know that you wrote something that is going to connect with eventually, you know, more women than that can help make a change in their lives. Imagine sitting there suffering like you did for 2 decades, just sitting there and thinking you're just something's wrong with you. You're broken. Like this doesn't make any sense. No one will listen to you. Pampering and Motrin, that does not work, right? Uh, so imagine that impact that this book will make on people. I mean, I feel like it's like a skipping stone. It's just going to keep rippling through.
I hope so. I think my greatest hope is that you know, I don't want to say starts a conversation because there is a conversation around PMDD, but it amplifies one. I've had people write to me and
Yeah.
say, you know what, I gave this book to my mother-in-law who doesn't understand PMDD. And that was like incredibly gratifying because that's exactly why I wrote this. It's sort of this primer on what is this, what does it mean, how does it impact people, because it's poorly understood, and then it's really easy to just sort of blame the individual of, oh, this person's morally weak, they're not strong, they're not disciplined. No, their biology is different. They have no control over these breakdowns, and the tragedy is there are treatments, they're effective, and they're easily accessible, and people just don't know that it's an option. I didn't know.
That is great to know that there are treatments. Like, what was some advice you could give to people now if they are having these problems to like push it with their doctor? What would be something you would advise to people?
Absolutely take it up with your doctor. And if your doctor doesn't listen to you, find another doctor. A lot of the people I did talk to or interview, because PMDD is not well known, they were not believed, which is tragic. It's the last thing you need. But there's a range of treatments. Sort of the first line is either antidepressants or birth control. Unfortunately, today we still don't know. We're starting to realize that there are different types of PMDD. So people respond differently. Some people respond really well to birth control, some
Mm.
people to certain types of birth control, but not others. I was one of them where some birth controls, it was like, yeah, this is much better. Other ones, it was like, oh God, it's worse. Also, antidepressants. Now, these don't work for everyone, but it's worth a shot.
It's worth not feeling the way it makes you feel and what it does to your body. Looking at your whole body of work, I mean, I know you still have like also double this body of work to go. Looking forward, like, do you feel like you might get back to writing these novels that were what would you call these? Because you're a novelist, you've written 2 books, right? But by novelist, are you mean more like these like short stories and things that are, do you think you'll get back to that?
I already am back to it. I'm working on a novel right now.
Can you tell us what it's about or no?
Oh my God, I'm so bad at elevator pitches, but in short, it's about
How about a cocktail pitch?
Okay, cocktail pitch. I like to think of it as
Yeah.
persuasion set in the Indian diaspora with hints of Zimbabwe and researching blood and mental illness.
Okay, I'm into that book. That sounds very interesting. And I just want to point out, you probably know this because such a super journalist, writer, person, you've just come all the way back to what you said earlier in the very beginning, that like you've realized that, how much could you write about, you're being biracial and having this diversity in yourself. How far could that go? Back to that end, back to the circle. You've made a full circle.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate that. Yeah, fingers crossed. I admit I feel more comfortable in nonfiction, but we'll see what happens with the novel.
Interesting. You feel more. I love it that you've come back though to your fiction like desires and passion, because I think we do make circles in our lives, right? We wake up one day, you had no newspapers, you're like, so you go to find yourself, so you go to Malaysia, and then you find all these experiences changing your brain up there, and then you find yourself probably where you are most comfortable, but there's always going to be something in the back of your head about, you know, that fiction, just because it was part of you when you woke up.
Yep, I'm haunted by it. I have friends who are like, Shalene, like nonfiction's working for you. Just like do the strategic thing. And I would love to. I would love to be a strategic person, but you don't end up as a writer if you're strategic, let's be honest.
Absolutely. And Hemingway, I keep coming back to him, but like, and even Twain, like they were working, they did a lot of, I call it commercial work, Shailene. Like, okay, that's your commercial work. They did a lot of that, they were in war. Hemingway was out, taking notes, writing newspaper stories, in Spain. Um, because that work, that passion, the thing that haunts them is not going to go away, but they needed that commercial work to. I think you can do both. I don't see why you can't do both.
Oh my goodness, Jennifer, we could be here all day. I have such a rant about this. But I feel like I essentially feel like at least, I
We
was
have
a
time
creative.
for a rant.
Okay, I'm gonna go off. I was a creative writing major undergrad. And I remember I was graduating in the middle of the recession, and I asked one of my professors if I could skip class for a job interview. And she was like, "Oh, sure." And she was like, "So what are you looking at? Publishing?" And I was like, "I will take anything I can get." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "There's a recession going on." And she seemed to have no idea. And there was just so little education about how you pay your bills or you make money. I think the idea was one person who went through a program like this told me his professor told him to just move home to his parents' basement and sit there for 2 years writing until he had a wonderful best-selling novel. I would still be in my parents' basement if I did that. So you have to make your way in the world. Most of us do.
Yes, yes, and you're right. Nobody's telling you that. I mean, nobody tells you that, and you have to take opportunities. I interviewed a man last week, and he was saying that he tries to every job title he's ever had has all been every job he's ever had has always been about what he can do, not the title. Like, what kind of things can I do? I don't care about the title. How can I create a yes situation? He said, if I didn't take the path that I took, I wouldn't be, like you said, I'd be sitting in my parents' basement still writing. And even my own community, I don't know about your community, but even my own mother is like, can you get a real job? This is a job.
It is absolutely a job. It's a career. And, I've
Yeah.
had this patchwork of things.
Yeah.
I have taken some really unglamorous writing jobs that have paid really well because I did my year, like I did my, oh, I'm going to like be a starving novelist for a year, which I did not last. And part of that was I did not like not having money come in and living off of my savings. Like I just realized Shalene is unhappy when she goes to the grocery store and starts having to look at like how much chocolate costs. That is a problem.
Or how much with this bag of beans? How far would this bag of beans go?
Right, exactly, and it's just like, you can't create like that when you're constantly like, "Oh my god, like, I need to produce something and then sell it," and taking
Yeah.
jobs was amazing. I took a job where I was writing up financial reports for different credit card systems, and is it sexy? Like, no, but you know what it did? Like, it paid my rent, it gave me the freedom to spend the rest of the day working on novels. I still haven't sold a novel, but it put saving like it gave me some savings for retirement. It gave me peace of mind that I can spend investing on my passion project so that I don't have to worry, oh my God, am I going to be on the street if I can't sell this novel?
We're going to take this and make this the clip because this is, you just spoke to the heart of, I'm sure, what a lot of writers are sitting there feeling. I also, for me, had to break down I call it my creative work, and that feels like I'm belittling it, versus my commercial work. It's not the creative work, it's my work. And I also take commercial jobs that pay really well, still writing, because you don't get paid. I don't, I'll just say it. Forbes isn't listening to this, but they definitely don't pay enough to buy the dog food, for a month. Uh, but I love it. I love it. But my heart, where you said my heart is here, but I think that you're brilliant. And I think balancing these two things is just strategically smart. When people say, just why don't you just say that you're successful being this nonfiction writer, that's okay. Yeah, you're successful there, but it's the whole. It's not, when you're a writer, it's not just that.
I love that, Jennifer. And I feel like writers are not told that often because, I feel like there is this hierarchy in the creative
Yes.
world. And what I was told growing up is writers don't get paid. And I think I internalized that. And what I didn't realize is there are writing jobs out there that pay, and they will actually pay well, because it turns out, if you work hard, if you turn in things on time, and you can structure something, which most people cannot do. Oh, and if you're not an asshole, people want to work with you. And there's a shortage of competent people out there. So there are the writing jobs, but you know what? They may not be the glamorous, like, cover story on the print magazine, or interviewing a celebrity, or
Yeah.
that, that novel that everyone's reading that wins, like, the Man Booker Prize. Or even if you do write that, the money might not be that great. I was shocked to sort of learn the difference between speaking fees for famous fiction writers versus, someone with a nonfiction platform in business. And why not figure out a balance so that you can live your life and not have to worry about making
Yes.
rent? Because how can you create good art or good work if you're constantly worried about staying alive?
You are speaking to me like, I thought I was alone in this. Like, this is why it's so great to talk to people, because you can't create if you're worried about money. And then when the commercial work comes in, and like you said, I'm going to Whole Foods today, I'm not even going to worry about it. And then you come home and you feel that beautiful, like almost like buzzy, like you're on a high in a way when you're creating and having the words flow. You're not caring about anything around you. I agree with you. There are great publications out there that do pay jobs that pay very well. And you're right. The feedback I get from one publication with a university is that you're the only one that does stuff on time. You're very structured. You are fast. You turn stuff around. You take criticism very easily and you fix it. And that's why she keeps coming back. She comes back every quarter. She also was a journalist and got hired to run this magazine. And she said, she told the guy, she says, I want a budget for real writers, So she gets it. And it's great working with her. Sometimes their timelines are short. Sometimes they're long. Sometimes they come in the last minute. Can you interview this dean? Can you interview this professor? I'm like, sure, no problem. And I feel great about that. I also don't mind the non-glamorous writing. I'm doing that right now. I don't mind it. Like, it pays really well. And I'm still a writer.
And honestly, I love writing, and I've worked a bunch of different jobs before I became a writer. So
Yeah.
it's just made it so clear to me, like, oh, I could be doing something else that's not writing. I'd rather have this unglamorous job and, set my own hours, be able to work from home.
Yes.
It's funny because I was on a panel for college students at my old college, and I think they were kind of looking for accomplishments, and we had to say our biggest accomplishment. And mine was, I have paid my rent and paid all of my bills and not needed any financial help as a writer, and I'm really proud of that. But I don't think it sounded that glamorous to the college students who were like, "Yeah, duh." Like, but it's like I've gotten to do what I
Ah,
love. I do it on my own terms, and I can pay my bills.
yes.
And
It's you, that to me. Yeah. And you know what? Just say, to say you make money as a writer, Like I love that you put that badge on. I think it's important to put that badge on. I say it all the time. I'm a writer and I earn a living. I bought this house. I'm a writer. Like, I did this with this pencil for everybody. I'm holding up a pencil.
100%. And this is not just like a total respect to people who are not bringing in money. I realize that it is a really hard and strange game. It is frustrating. Like I
Yeah.
went to a party once and someone's like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "I'm a writer." And then she turned to my husband and she was like, "Oh, so you're the wonderful man who makes it possible for Shalene to write. What do you do?" And it's just a moment of like,
Unbelievable.
no. Like,
Yeah. I mean, women can be the worst. Yeah.
yeah.
And also, I just think, like you said, you're just a writer, and writers can write. Like you can write. You can go from The Power of Trust, from, that book, to all the articles you've written. The recent one in Fast Company you wrote like 2 hours ago about 80% of the companies. I can't remember what the headline was, but to writing about period pain, right? And back to this new fiction novel. That's what a writer does. A writer writes. A good writer writes.
Oh my gosh, Jennifer, this is like so
So,
validating too, because I go through these moments too, as well, of like, oh, should I like pick a beat or why am I so spread apart? So it's nice to hear that someone else looks at it and is like,
no,
yeah, this is great.
you should. You are on the right track. Like you are an example for every writer. You're an example for me. I've only written a chapter in one nonfiction book, one chapter, but I thought that was like a big thing.
It's
Uh,
huge.
so I stepped into my writer badge a lot more. I don't know, as I've gotten older. I don't know about you. It's like I'm more like I'm a writer, and people are like, "Whoa, what do you write?" Well, sometimes I write poetry, and sometimes I write about artificial intelligence and data centers.
And sometimes both in the same combination.
Yes, at the same time. So yeah, thank you so much for taking this time to come. The next time I come to Boston, I would love to meet you and spend more time with you. I'm just so grateful for you sharing all of this. And we're going to put all of the notes in everything we've talked about into the show notes. So everybody listening to this can go buy both of her books if you want to talk about trust. And then you really want to either give this book about the pain of periods. Please, we're going to put it in the notes. You can go buy it. You can share it with people. You can connect with Shalene. I'm sure she will talk to you about her experiences writing that book. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jennifer. It's a true pleasure, and I hope that we can meet in person soon.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Shalene Gupta here on Tiny Little Victories. I think one of the things that I love about being able to tell people's stories is they are so spectacular. People start one place and you end up in a whole different universe. And I find that magical because that is life. And Shalene is a really great example of someone that knew they were a writer and had to take a journey to create this very successful career that she's created as a nonfiction and as a fiction writer, because she sneaked to us her new fiction book. So I think that's pretty amazing. You heard that first here on Tiny Little Victories. Now, I promised you guys that I had a secret, and I do have a secret. And so if you listened all the way to the end, you get to know the secret, which is we have merch. Yeah, finally, merch. You're going to get some Tiny Little Victories t-shirts for your fall wardrobe. Summer's over. Forget about summer. So we're going to put these in the show notes where you can order some merch, Tiny Little Victories products, which I think you'll like. That's my secret. So we will see you in 2 weeks on Tiny Little Victories. Oh yeah, actually, don't forget to rate, follow, and share, because I read all of your comments and absolutely love them. Right now, we have a 5-star rating. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Forget that. Cut that, Dim. We're going to cut that. We're just going to cut that stuff. See you next week on Tiny Little Victories. That's good enough. Bye.